Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Let's wait for a few minutes to let everyone else join as well. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. I appreciate your time and presence here. Over the course of this webinar, we will deep dive into the invoice management system and input service distribution. My name is Nishita, your host for today. I've been working with marketing team at Cygnet.One for the past 3 years, and it is my pleasure to guide you through this session. Let's begin the webinar by introducing our esteemed speakers. First of all, we have Mr. Anand Parasrampuria, Associate Partner at Dhruva Advisors. He is a chartered accountant and a CFA Level 2 candidate, bringing with him over 19 years of experience in indirect taxation. Anand has worked extensively across sectors such as manufacturing, IT, BFSI, and retail. Joining him is Mr. Rituraj Bhide, a company secretary and a law graduate with over 16 years of experience in indirect tax and consultancy. He has deep expertise in GST implementation, compliance, litigation, and advisory. Rituraj has served clients across auto components, IT, and real estate industries, and is a frequent speaker at prominent tax forums and webinars. Next, we are pleased to have with us Mr. Anil Rajnala, our APAC business head. Many of you may have recognized him from our previous events and webinars. With over 30 years of experience in tax technology and business transformation, he continues to be a trusted thought leader. And lastly, we have Mr. Kunal Parmar, a tech visionary with deep expertise in GST systems. Kunal has a proven track record of building scalable, secure, and compliant B2B tech solutions. His focus area includes system architecture, e-invoicing, and API integrations that simplify the GST compliance for large enterprises. Over to you, speakers.
Thank you, Kesha. Hi, everyone. I'm Anand Parasrampuria. I'm working as an associate partner in Dhruva Advisors. Today, what we plan to cover is a refresh of the IMS solution. How does it impact the GST compliance landscape? What technological solutions are available from a Cygnet perspective? Followed by a discussion of ISD by my colleague Rituraj Bhide, and what is the technology solutions available from a Cygnet side from Krunal. Kesha, you moved on to the next slide. So, as all of you are aware, invoice management system, I mean, if you look at the GST law, the government had specified somewhere in July and August, they had issued a circular where they have said that for credit notes, the tax adjustments can be allowed provided the supplier submits a proof that the recipient has not claimed a credit. While for the past years, for July 17 onwards, till an electronic mechanism was envisaged, the government has directed the tax payers to obtain the requisite confirmation. Now, and the circular stated that, till the time this process of collecting confirmation should continue, till the time an electronic mechanism is devised by the government authorities. Now, post that, in October, they came up with this electronic mechanism of invoice management solution, wherein all, invoices and credit notes for B2B suppliers are to be uploaded. And apart from then, they had announced several other changes in the compliance landscape, like, RCM ledger, ITC reclaim ledger, or negative liability ledger. They had also announced, that ISD will be mandatory effective from 1st of April 2025. The other key updates that are in changes that are in progress are B2C invoicing. There are discussions around that B2C invoicing will be made mandatory in some point in time. For e-invoicing, there is a discussion that if the turnover is about 10 crores, then the invoice needs to be generated within 30 days for the services element. Coming back to the IMS, Section 34, what does it say is that no reduction in output tax liability unless the recipient has reversed the input tax credit of the tax amount reflected in the credit note, and the tax incidence has not been passed on. Okay. a new rule has been inserted to prescribe the manner in which output tax liability of the supplier shall be adjusted against the credit note issued by him. Okay. Correspondingly, there is also an amendment that has been proposed in section 38 is an auto-generated statement. The word auto-generated statement, which was referring to GST or 2B, has been just replaced with a statement based on the actions that are being taken in the invoice management system. Similarly, the relevant changes have been envisaged to be done in section 39. Now, uh, what is the role of IMS? Basis whatever actions are being undertaken, that will be taken as the sufficient proof of the confirmation from the customer perspective with respect to the credit notes or invoicing for that matter. Kesha, you can move on to the next slide. What is the objective? Again, it gives a real-time visibility to the taxpayer as well as to the government on the ITC part. Minimize the ITC error, improve the reconciliation process, enable, the taxpayers to, address corrections through the GSTN portal. What all documents are reflected in the IMS portal is all B2B invoices, B2B credit notes, B2B debit notes. How does the invoices are getting reflected is basically where to transaction where an invoicing is applicable basis the IRN data, the IMS or the data is auto-populated basis the e-invoice data that is available with the government authorities. Second source is if e-invoice is not applicable, then it updates or it captures the data basis the GSTR1 or invoice furnishing utility or GSTR1A that is filed by the supplier. Okay. Certain transactions are not covered as a part of this IMS tool are all import transaction, ISD and RCM transactions, documents where the ITC flag becomes ineligible on account of place of supply rule, or documents that is uploaded after the expiry of the timeline specified in section 16.4, that is by after 30th of November. So say for example, if invoice is dated 1st of April 2024, and if it is getting uploaded in on 30th of November, that will and the vendor files his GSTR1, maybe in December 25 onwards, then that invoice of that GSTR1 will not get reflected in IMS, and all the TCS and TDS credits. Once once a data set is populated in the IMS, users are expected to take certain actions, which are either accept, reject, pending. If no actions are taken in any of the transaction or for the entire IMS transaction, then by 14th of the month, it is the system is designed in such a manner that everything will be considered as deemed accepted, and the records will then move on to GSTR 2B. Now, if I accept a record, then it becomes a part of GSTR 2B, and it can be used for my reconciliation purposes. If it is rejected, then the data flows out of the IMS system as well as it is not considered as a part of 2B. So we'll have to be very careful when it comes to our vendor invoices, whether or credit notes or debit note for that matter, or before taking the action of a rejection. Similarly, if pending as an action is select, then that document will be retained in the IMS portal, but will not flow to the GSTR 2B. For certain set of transactions, pending as an action is not allowed. Maybe and then the key area where this is causing a lot of issues for companies is pending as an action is not allowed for credit note, any upward amendment in credit note or a downward amendment in credit note, or in scenarios where there is a downward amendment of invoice or debit note if the original document was rejected. What are the impacts of the action? We'll cover it in detail, but I think the key impact is if the credit note is getting rejected by the customer, then it has an impact on the tax liability. Can whether data populated in IMS can be updated? Yes, it can be updated. If say for example certain documents are not flowing on account through IRN as a system, then those can be uploaded through GSTR1 filing functionality, or if there was a difference in the values, then also initially the IMS portal will pick the data basis the iron, uh, but if there was some error in generation of iron, then the correct numbers can be updated through GSTR1, and the IMS portal will pick the data, the latest data basis the GSTR1 that has been filed. So we have just given a pictorial view of how the data will be captured in the IMS portal. How does it? What all actions are to be undertaken, and the timelines for that one. And post introduction of IMS, how will the entire compliance function work? So, say for example, supplier will upload the data through either an IRP portal, will file as GSTR1. Basis that the data will be populated in IMS, and basis the action undertaken, 14th of the subsequent month, 2B will get generated. Then the taxpayer will have to do their regular reconciliation. In the meantime, if there is any action or new update that is happening, then 2B has to be again recomputed between 14th and 20th of the month. If there is any change in the action in the IMS, or some of the suppliers file their GSTR1, probably the 2B needs to be recomputed, and then 3B filings are to be done. I think the important point for businesses is that unless and until IMS is monitored on a regular basis, uh, it gives the taxpayer or the tax team a very limited time of 3-4 days to go through each and every transaction. And hence, it is important that with the introduction of IMS, the relevant stakeholders are involved, uh, uh, you know, actively, and not just at the month end between 11th to 14th of the month. So there are a couple of slides which these slides will explain. I'm sure most of you will know what is the impact, but just to summarize, these are for each type of document or scenario, what is the impact of the action. So if it is an invoice or a debit note, uh, any action taken by the recipient doesn't impact the tax liability. If it is a B2B amendment or a downward movement, okay, then action of rejection of any downward movement in the taxable value will result in my increasing the tax liability. But if it is an upward movement in any invoice or a debit note, then irrespective of the action taken by the recipient, there is no impact on the tax liability of the supplier. Similarly, for credit note, if it is accepted, it doesn't impact my tax liability. If it is rejected, then by the customer, then it increases the tax liability of the taxpayer. So I think here there is a big concern being highlighted by the business. But as of now, the government has not given any relaxation of allowing pending as an action. So, and there are various scenarios of business practices where, credit notes are being issued. Sometimes it may so happen that company raises an invoice erroneously, or there is some error in the invoice raising, and subsequently they have to issue a credit note. So those are all cases. Ideally, the taxpayers have to align the processes and ensure that such instances are minimized. And if at all, such instances are there, then also there is to be a requirement for proactive engagement with the business team and the customer, that if at all such invoices and credit notes are being captured in the IMS tool, the customer should not reject the credit note. Similarly, for any upward revision in the credit note value, if there is a rejection from the customer perspective, it will increase the tax liability. Same goes for our invert side. If I am accepting the vendor invoice, then only it will flow into my 2B for me to claim a credit. But if I'm rejecting an invoice or keeping it pending, the companies will not be able to claim the ITC. If there is on the invert side, if I accept the credit note of my vendor, then it leads to a reduction in ITC. So when we are accepting a credit note of the vendor, we also need to ensure that we have knowledge of what this credit note pertains to, whether I have claimed the invoice credit of that original invoice against which this credit note has been issued. And if I'm accepting the credit note, I would want to accept the invoice, claim it, and then through credit note, accept the credit note and reduce it. So it's not just a single action. Credit note actions of acceptance is linked to what the action the companies or the taxpayers have undertaken for the original invoice against which this credit note has been issued. How does it impact my compliance? Unless and until I take any action on IMS data flow, the records don't flow into GST or 2D. Okay, so it's either all records are deemed accepted, or the taxpayer or the companies do individually go and select the action to be undertaken in the IMS. Unless that happens, 2B will not get generated. And if there is a change in the action to be undertaken after 14, then 2B has to be mandatorily recomputed. So, as I have said, action is required on every document. Uh, Doing manually could be more challenging. So people or companies need to look at technological solutions and monitor the IMS on a regular basis. Maybe frequency can be decided weekly, twice in a month, depending upon the large or the scale of the organization. Uh, to the extent the flexibility of selecting an action needs to be minimized. If a record is being accounted for, it should be automatically kept as accepted or rejected. Scenarios like pending, uh, particularly for credit note and certain amendment, there should be a limited recipient flexibility. So with this, I'll hand it over to Anil.
Yeah, thank you. So I think having understood the functional impacts of what the IMS as a functionality is likely to have on our compliance, let's talk about the technology through which this implementation and compliance will try and make it. So let's start with the initial fact. IMS is an independent compliance module which Government of India has implemented. Now government has started giving daily IMS data on a frequent scale, in the sense that technically the government is giving the data within 2 hours of e-invoice generation. If someone generates an e-invoice right now, and if I am a vendor to Dhruva, then I think within Dhruva's ecosystem as an GSP, I would be in a position to start getting the data technically within 2 hours of my e-invoice generation. That's the speed with which the data is coming in. What we can give as a part of the thing is, today when you will go to the government portal, you will find that for one record, maybe one GST and some 500 entries are being allowed to download. But when you do as a corporate, you want to take it and sync it daily, the GSP module ensures that the data can be synced without any gap and without any limitation on the quantity. You can seamlessly keep on syncing the data daily, irrespective of the quantity that you are dealing with. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So exactly what is it that we're talking about? Look into the IMS piece. Here we are saying we will be getting invoice daily. What is needed once you get this counterparty invoice? You would want to first reconcile it, saying that let me reconcile this data with the purchase data so that I know what all invoices I need to accept and what all invoices I need to keep it pending, which means it is now mandatory that all your reconciliation you will have to do it online, and this online data is always available to us because we now have to share with the government our online status of what we want to do with each invoice. Third, once I have done my reconciliation, the immediate need would be, how do I inform my counterparty? How do I inform my supplier that, look, I have accepted your invoice or I have rejected your invoice and I have kept it pending, and this is the reason for which I have kept it pending. Fourth, once I have taken this entire action, I will push the data to IMS so that the required 2B can be generated. Fifth, as a part of the understanding of technology, the minute you file your 3B, the entire data in IMS is purged other than the pending data. So technically, what one would want to know is that whatever actions I have taken in IMS for past reference, will it be available? If you are with Cygnet GSP, that data would be available on request whenever you want to see. So we are looking at the entire e-invoicing part as an end-to-end one. Get daily data, do a pre-reconciliation before IMS action. Once you take an action, inform and notify your vendor about the action which you have taken, and then subsequently take bulk action. So this is what we are taking. Once you have taken a reconciliation, the system gives you the opportunity to take bulk action on the entire IMS part. So based on your accept, reject, pending, whatever is that entire thing, and your reconciliation part of match, mismatch, based by tolerance, you will decide these actions I want it to be programmed as accepted. So the system will automatically take all your instructions and automatically keep accepting, keeping pending all the transactions. For example, if there are certain transactions which you have accepted but with a tolerance and you do not want to accept it right away, you can then automatically put a flag saying that all such reconciliations should be by default put into pending, and you would then revisit them with the aspect whether you want to accept it or not once you have got the required replies from the from your vendor. So all these aspects are pre-built as a part of the logic into this. The third part, now what we showed right now is the purchase part of the data which you have got from your supplier. Now what about the data which you are selling, your outward data? That is also being accepted or rejected by your buyers. You will also come to know about the status of those invoices also, that what your buyers are taking an action against the invoice shared by you, so that you come to know that how many of your invoices have been accepted, rejected, and whatever is the current status right now. Next. Now this is one part which I want, friends, all of you to understand, is the notification piece. The most important part of this entire module is the minute you take IMS action, how fast do I inform my vendor that this is the problem with the invoice, please correct it. And not only sending it to him by mail, one would also send it into the communication center or the notification center of his GST and ID. If you remember, get into your GST and ID, you will realize there is a communication notification center with every GST and ID which government has created. We use our APIs to send this notification straight away into that notification center. So as and when your vendor will log in into his GST and ID, he will see into the notifications which you have sent for anything which is pending or rejected, so that you have a hard coded link available with a clear proof that it is there into his GST and ID notification center. Now, why this is important? Because understand one thing, the way we are looking at IMS, what is the biggest challenge with IMS today? That the because auto computed has been stopped, the 2B will have to be generated, which means unless an IMS action is not taken, 2B will not get generated, which is indirectly trying to say that based on IMS action, your 2B will be defined, your 2B will be locked. If that is the status, then it is very important that every single vendor of yours gets minimum 10 to 15 days to take corrective action on the invoices on which the action has been initiated. To make this fast, we have given this notification center so that the minute you take an action, instantly the same day, the vendor can be notified on the action being taken by you and what is the corrective actions you want from him. Next. And of course, as I said, post 3B filing, once the data is purged, the data would be available from Cygnet on request for any of the actions you have taken in the past. Now, I will quickly run through one more point, which is the key to this entire thing. Nishida, next is the how will you get your purchase entries daily for reconciliation? Understand the current fact. The current fact is, and you would all understand this part, that today you get your purchase entries at least, it takes 15 to 20 days for the purchase entry to get into ERP. The straight example is, You get today your data for reconciliation by the 5th of the subsequent month, 4th or 5th of the subsequent month. You spend another 5 to 7 days for the reconciliation piece. So by 10th to 12th, your entire reconciliation is ready. And once your reconciliation is done, you hardly have 2 to 3 days to take corrective actions. With that scenario, with the current scenario, if it is implemented for IMS, it would be a very difficult scene to move forward, because you can't expect your vendors to take corrective actions within 2 days of IMS action. You need to give them minimum 15 to 20 days to take action, which means it is important that how your purchase entry you can get within 5 days of invoice generation. That is the key aspect. That is the key ask of every single tax professional in the country today. So let's understand how this is happen. The first and foremost important part is, how do I collect my invoices from the vendors? The most easiest part is collect it by email the minute, and don't collect the email of all the stakeholders across the company. Create one email ID. Let's say purchase invoice at the rate Cygnet.One. The minute you create this invoice, this email ID, let all the purchase invoices be collected onto one email ID only. And with the help of an RPA tool, I can collect these invoices every half an hour from this email box. And here the invoices are available to you. So how much time does it take to collect an invoice? As much time as I am taking the time right now to talk to you, hardly 1 or 2 minutes. That is what it can be done to collect invoices. Now let's come to part number two. Once the invoice is collected, the second part important is, how do we read the invoice? So let's understand this part, that the minute this invoice is visible, the invoice is visible, you will be able to extract the data using an intelligent data processing from the invoice. I will extract the data from the invoice. Then I will start doing the job of a tax professional onto this invoice. I'll start validating it. Is the GST active? Is the GST and e-invoice enabled? If it is e-invoice enabled, it is a valid e-invoice. Then I will read the QR code. The QR code of this e-invoice will have 7 data points. I will match this with the data points of the invoice. So practically what I am doing right now is, I am ensuring that whatever is the data available in GSTN, because what is e-invoice? Nothing but 2A data drafted after 48 hours. The same data comes to you as to be by 2A by night. That's it. So what I do by matching it with the QR code is, I am telling you that the e-invoice data is the same as what is the data available into this invoice. This exactly happens within the whatever narrative I gave you. It takes 5 minutes to validate this invoice. Plus, friends, Government of India gave last November 2024 these 23 these counterparty e-invoice JSON, which means that if you are my if let's say I am Hindustan Liver, then I would have all the e-invoices data of all my vendors, full e-invoice line item wise. JSON would be available. This is available even today. So all that I will do is, once I will validate that invoice, I will go fetch this e-invoice data, take the data line item wise, and then park it into your entire portal as your purchase entry. It takes only 5 to 10 minutes to get this entire data, and this is the most valid data, because here you are getting the e-invoice data line item wise with the supplier given adjacent data available with you to be parked as a purchase entry. Next part. Let's take into one more practical scenario, and I'll move fast. Let's say invoices don't come only by your emails; they also come by trucks. So the minute a truck is moving out from any factory, let's say the truck is moving out of Hyderabad and is going to come to Ahmedabad. The minute the truck moves, the vendor will do two things: he will generate an invoice, he will generate an e-way bill. Friends, both the data would be available to you within 2 hours of invoice generation. Let's say after 2 days, if the truck reaches your counter, you will have these data available in advance: which truck is coming, with which email, which e-way bill details, what are the quantity, what is that invoice detail, everything will be available to you. All you have to do is take that invoice at the gate, scan it, and send it across for unloading. You will be able to then start, based on this entire thing, you will be able to start extracting the data, validate the data, take the counterpart data, and create your entire purchase entry. Now let's look into the last part of it. Invoice entry is now available to you. So if you, I'm just showing you an ERP screen. The e-invoice data has been parked into the cockpit based on the extraction and everything which we did. Now I can do the entire Miro automation, that is purchase invoice versus GST, GRN versus PO data reconciliation. Do that entire thing, find out the difference, post quality check if it's any, and my data is available for my purchase register. This presuming that the unloading, GRN activity, everything takes 2 to 3 days to complete. It takes another 2 to 3 days for the truck to leave from a specific place and come to my place. It takes hardly half an hour for me to extract the data and read it. Within 5 to 7 days, at any given moment of time, the data would be available for purchase entry under any circumstances. Take up any circumstances, you will find this data available in 5 to 7 days. Now let's understand one simple fact. Today is 1st of March. If I get these invoice details to me for my IMS activity by the 7th of the March, friends, the same day I will do IMS reconciliation. The same day evening, I will notify my entire vendors of what is the mismatch. The vendor will have on an average 15 to 20 days to take corrective actions. If I keep taking these corrective actions every day for all my invoices, every single invoice will get 15 to 20 days, minimum 10 days to take corrective actions. And if I start doing this, there will always be a high probability that I get my full-fledged ITC amount on the 14th when it is generated, because every vendor has got sufficient time to take corrective actions. So having explained this, the invoice digitization part is an incremental activity which maybe the tax professionals will have to help us to talk to the supply chain and procurement, and maybe you can request your CFOs to help us reach out to them and do it, because this is what you will need, if not today, immediately once IMS is implemented. Now I am requesting Kunal to quickly show us the IMS module.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So this is Cygnet's compliance platform, namely Cygnet ASP. The solution is up and running for last 7 years now, since the inception of GST. And this portal is unified one. It is having the capability of e-invoice, e-bill, and GST. When we are saying GST, it covers everything, all the monthly and yearly returns, as well as all the different kind of reconciliations. However, in the interest of time, we'll be focusing on IMS and ISD only in today's session. So the first thing anyone would be doing on this portal out at day zero is configuring your GST registrations. We are calling it entities. And at the time of configuring entities, there will be certain configurations available which can be enabled, which will allow system to automatically sync data of IMS on daily basis. Okay, otherwise user can manually sync those data as well. Other is you can create n number of users, you can give them the restricted roles and rights as well. So that is something about the day zero activity. Then it is, when we are talking about the reconciliation, it is always between the two data sets. One is PR, purchase register, and the counterparty data. So how we can sync the purchase register from your source system? So user can use the manual upload method. They can convert the data in Cygnet's format and upload onto the Cygnet's Excel format on this portal. That is one method. We also support various integration options as well. We offer that. One is API based method, and others are the file based methods as well. Okay, so we support all these different kind of integration methods, and we can achieve the end-to-end integration with it. When we are saying end-to-end, all the forward and the backward integration. Okay, we can sync the purchase register onto this portal. After the reconciliation and taking the action, we can sync those actions back into your ERP as well through this integration. Okay, so that is how the data can be imported. Now, IMS is a separate module onto the Cygnet portal, right? So that is like this, IMS under this GST module. And as soon as you land into this module, there is a reconciliation summary given here. okay, which gives you a fair idea on what all data set is there in the system and how it is bifurcated into the different action buckets of IMS, that is accepted, rejected, and pending, and the no actions you have taken. So this is giving a brief summary on the overall data. Then beside it, there is reconciliation screen, which is the main reconciliation ground for the end users. Here, your purchase register and the counterparty IMS data is actually getting reconciled. Right. So there are many filters we have given which user can use, or more filters also we have given which user can use and design their own reports as well. As soon as the reconciliation is done, okay, the reconciliation, the data will be bifurcated into the multiple reconciliation buckets like the match, mismatch, near match. So that is the normal reconciliation buckets you would have seen in any reconciliation tool. But here the value addition which we are doing from our side is the we have backed this tool with an ML based reconciliation engine. Okay, so let us say if the normal reconciliation is doing an 80% reconciliation, there are still chance that 20% reconciliation documents are still remaining either in the GST only or on the PR only buckets. Okay, so our ML based engine will run onto this remaining set of data, and then based on its intelligence, it will further bifurcate the data into 24 different buckets, starting from the potential 1 and it's going up to 6.2. Okay, so these are the different buckets which is based on the by this normal reconciliation plus this ML based reconciliation, usually we are achieving 98% plus reconciliation out of this. So after this reconciliation, user would the next step user would like to take is the action. Now there are multiple ways to take the action onto the portal. One is of course line by line. You can take the action, accept, reject, pending, or you can reset the action if you've already taken. The next method is based on the filter criteria. If you are putting any, if you want to focus on any particular set of data, you can put up the required filters. Then you can take the bulk actions as well. Okay, and you can choose which all buckets you want to take the actions on, take the action, and then finally you can preview the actions. It will show you that what all records will be impacted through this bulk action, and then you can apply the action. So this is the second method you can take the actions through. The third method is the file-based method. So there are still certain set of users are there who are very much hands-on practice with the Excel-based exercise. So they would like to take the Excel out of the system, and based on their business practice, they would like to put up the actions in the Excel and put up the remarks, and then they would like to upload the actions directly onto it. So we are supporting that. We are you can download the Excel sheet. There are two columns. One is action and another is remarks. You can use these columns, put up the remarks and take the action, upload the same file again onto the portal through this import module, that is document reconciliation. And portal will automatically take the action based on the flags you have mentioned within the Excel sheet. So this is the third method. Now, since system is already doing the reconciliation, certain user set would offer definitely like the system to take the actions automatically, right? So we are supporting that as well. So in setting, we have given a full-fledged setting for the IMS reconciliation here. So here one can set the matching criteria, the tolerance limits for mismatch buckets, for near match buckets as well. And at last, we have given the option for IMS actions. So as soon as you are enabling this, you can set the default action. So if you want that, okay, all the transactions which are landing into the IMS reconciliation, by default, it should be marked as pending. Okay, so that will be a default action will be taken on all the transactions within the IMS model. If you want to customize the actions for each and every different buckets, you can do so as well. By, let us say for the match bucket, there is a accept action you would like to take. And for all the different buckets, you can take the actions likewise. Okay, so that is how you would be taking the action, and you can configure the actions. Okay. So that is how you can configure, and then further you can push these actions onto the GSTN portal. Then you can regenerate the GSTR 2B, and even after the reconciliation, if you want, you can change the reconciliation buckets as well. All right. So this is all about the IMS, and then you can take, as Anil sir has explained, you can send the notifications as well. We are supporting two kind of notifications. You can send the email notifications as well as the GSTN portal notifications as well. Okay. So this is all about IMS. I would like to hand over the session back to the other panelists to move ahead on the ISD side.
Thank you, Kunal. Yeah, can we have the slides, please? Okay, so good evening, everyone. Now we'll be talking about an important compliance which is going to impact most of the industry players from the next week. So all of us who have got more than one GST registrations will be impacted by this new compliance, which is mandatory compliance, which is coming on our way, which is Input Service Distributor or ISD. Now, ISD is not a new thing really. I mean, all of you would be remembering that even under the pre-GST era, under service tax regime, you had the concept of input service distributor. Number of companies would already be having ISD registration. So it's not a new concept as such. But still, for the benefit of everyone, let's quickly discuss what this concept is. So input service distributor is basically an office of a supplier of goods or supplier of services. So you could be a manufacturer, you could be a service provider. An input service distributor is an office which receives invoices for input services which are common across different GST registrations. So let me give you a simple illustration. Let's say I have a head office in Mumbai which receives a invoice for service like say statutory audit or a consultancy management consultancy services, which are not services consumed only by the head office. These services are very much consumed by all my locations, all the GST registrations. So, but it is invoiced at one of the place. So what ISD mechanism does is it enables me to use such common inputs and distribute them among all my applicable GST registrations, right? We can go to the next slide. Now, GST law has a very well-defined framework around the ISD mechanism, and there was a change in this sections and rules that we are seeing. So we have section 20, which talks about how an ITC should be distributed by an ISD. We have section 24, which talks about registration requirements for an ISD. Rule 39 is an important rule which talks about how input service credit should be distributed. What is the mechanism that is required to be followed by an ISD when it has to distribute the credit? Okay. Next slide, please. Now, till March 31st, 2025, having an ISD mechanism for distributing common credit was an option available. It was not a mandatory requirement. So typically, let's say if I have common services which are being billed out to one of my GST registrations, I could always opt for an ISD or I could opt for a cross-charge mechanism. It was not necessary for me to have an ISD registration. Okay. Therefore, what we see is across the industry, the practices which are being followed for distribution of input tax credit are diverse. There are some companies which have very much obtained ISD registration right from GST implementation since July 17. And they're using ISD mechanism to distribute common input credits. We also have other companies which have not yet distributed credit at all, which is not really the right thing. And we have third set of companies which are following the cross-charge mechanism, wherein what they do is they receive input services in one of their GST registration, and then from there they will do a cross-charge. We can go to the next slide. Now, what will happen from 1st April 2025 is that for all the third-party common services that I receive, it could be telecommunication services, it could be audit-related services or consultancy-related services, insurance, marketing, typically services which are used by across the registrations. Now, mandatorily, they will have to use the ISD mechanism for invoicing these, for distributing this credit. The other component of cross-charge, which is basically internally generated services, so services of head office, services of central functions like IT, finance, etc., those will continue to be under the cross-charge mechanism. There's no problem for that. But mainly the third-party common service invoices which you are receiving, they have to be now necessarily routed through the ISD mechanism. We can go to the next slide. So the basic difference for anyone who was following cross-charge till now and anyone who has to mandatorily move to ISD is that cross-charge could have been operated through the regular registration, but for ISD, I have to obtain a new ISD registration. ISD will be specifically for input services, whereas cross-charge could have other components in it. In ISD, it is mandatory that whatever credit is invoiced to an ISD registration in a specific month, it gets distributed in this very month. It has to be distributed in the same month. The distribution has to be in a proportionate manner based on the turnover. The ineligible credit which is there, which gets invoiced. So for example, let's say if I receive some common service which happens to be ineligible in nature, then I need to also distribute the credit of that to the relevant GST registrations. And an ISD invoice has to be issued for distribution of credit. So from cross-charge, the practices which were being followed to ISD, there is going to be a shift that we have to factor. Next slide, please. So the whole distribution mechanism under ISD is very well specified in the sections as well as rules. Okay. Now, first thing is that all the services which are common in nature, which are being used for more than one location, will have to be cross-charged, will have to be distributed through an ISD mechanism. So today, if you are receiving any input service invoice at any of your regular GST registration, from 1st April, you can't really have that scenario. From 1st April, you have to make sure that there is an ISD registration in place and all these common type of services are invoiced to this ISD registration. I don't have an option of having those invoices coming into my regular registration and me taking credit in my regular registration, or for that matter, cross-charging it. Now, I have to make sure that the distribution is happening to the appropriate states or GST registrations. So for example, let's say if I'm a company with 5 GST registrations and there is one common service that I have used, which is availed by 3 of my registration, then I have to make sure that the ISD distribution happens to those 3 registrations. The distribution happens on the basis of the turnover of the specific registration. There's also specific guidelines as to how the CGST, SGST, and IGST component needs to be distributed, and we'll talk about it in the next slide. And like I mentioned earlier, even the ineligible credit needs to be distributed. Of course, the receiving units will not avail that credit. They will call it as ineligible credit. But nevertheless, as an ISD registration, all the credits which come into my return, I need to distribute it among all the GST registrations. Next slide, please. Now, let's see how the input credit of CGST, SGST, and IGST needs to be distributed. If I receive an invoice with IGST on it, and I am registered in state A, and I need to distribute this credit to another registration in state B, I will distribute it as IGST only. If I receive CGST or SGST component in my invoice, and if I'm distributing it to a registration which is within the same state, then I can distribute it as CGST and SGST itself. Otherwise, I'll have to distribute it as IGST credit. We can take the next slide. Now, let's take a very simple case study, which will probably clarify the concept of ISD and how the distribution needs to happen. Okay, it's a very basic example that we've taken. So there is advertising company P, which is advertising a product A for this particular company, XYZ. And there's another advertising company Q, which is advertising for product B. Okay, so 2 advertising companies, one advertising product A, other advertising product B in a specific state, in state H. So if you see on the right hand side of the slide, you'll see that there are 4 states in which this company is operational. Product A is being supplied in state E, F, and G. and product B is being supplied in state G as well as H. Okay. But like I said, the company Q is providing marketing services for product B only in the state H. Okay. Now in this mix, what will happen is that the input service which I have received from company P, okay, if I receive, let's say, the invoice for from company P, that invoice or the credit of that invoice needs to be distributed across 3 states, state E, F, and G, because product A is being supplied in those 3 states. On the other hand, the marketing service and the input credit related to services which are provided by company Q will go only to state H, because these are specific services to which are provided for marketing in state H based on the facts what we have in the case study. We can go to the next slide, please. So what we basically have to understand here is that as a company, I have to be well aware of which are my services which are common. Then I need to be aware that which are the common registrations or which are the registration which can set to be recipient of that particular service. And then on the basis of the turnover of these relevant registration, I will distribute the credit to the relevant registrations, right? We can go to the next slide. With ISD becoming mandatory, there's one layer of compliance which will get added for all of us. So we have GSTR1 on 11th of every month. We have, so once my vendors have filed their GSTR1, the way GSTR2A gets populated, similarly, a GSTR6A gets populated for an ISD registration, which will tell me what are the invoices which have been raised on me. On the 13th of a month, I need to file ISD registration. I need to file ISD return with distribution of my credit. So if you see, there's one more return which is getting added every month for distributing the credit through ISD. So a new compliance which we need to factor in our calendars. We can take the next slide, please. So if we see today, the companies could be in different buckets. Like I said, you could be a company which already has an ISD registration, or you could be a company which does not have ISD registration. For both these entities, there is a important task at hand of rightly implementing the ISD within our systems. And we'll need to do a lot of activities. So there will be vendor communications, there will be obtaining of GST registration. So let's quickly break it down into two parts. If I'm already a company which has an ISD registration, possibly I'm all the way, I'm already there 80-90% ready. But what we need to make sure is that we need to relook at our purchase invoices. We need to look at our input services to ensure and be absolutely clear that all the services which are common in nature are very much being routed through an ISD registration only. I am not having those invoices invoiced to my regular registration. What we've seen in a lot of cases is that many companies have ISD registration with their head office, but even their other branches in different states receive some invoices which are actually common in nature. And for that, there is no ISD registration which has been taken. So one needs to look at whether the ISD registrations that you have are comprehensive, whether all the invoices which are common in nature are rightly being routed through ISD registration or not. And therefore, obtaining ISD registration, communicating with vendors so that the vendors are raising invoices on the right GST registration, training the team members who are handling with the booking of invoices, making necessary changes in the ERP are, host of activities one will need to complete in order to have right implementation of ISD. I'll take you to the next slide, which is the last slide that I wanted to cover, which is what are the key actions. Like I mentioned, the key actions for all of us who are looking at ISD implementation in the next week is to identify whether my classification of expenses is correct. If there's any tweak which is required, whether I have rightly classified all the common services, whether all the common services are being invoiced to my ISD registration only. If I need to obtain any new ISD registration, obtaining those and then communicating that to the vendors, rightly accounting for these common input invoices, and then on a monthly basis distributing this in a comprehensive manner. One last thought I just want to leave you with, and then I'll hand over this to Krunal, who will just quickly walk us through, the tool or the demo for how ISD is to be distributed through the Cygnet tool. So one last point I just want to leave you with is that up till now, ISD registration was never really an area which GST authorities scrutinized very thoroughly or looked at in their audits, etc. So whether ISD distribution is happening in the right manner, comprehensively, was never really an area of scrutiny by GST authorities. But what is likely is that because ISD mechanism is becoming mandatory from the year coming ahead, the next financial year, it's very likely that the GST authorities will look at the manner in which you're distributing your credit, the manner in which you're taking your credits, whether all the common credits are being rightly distributed. There's high possibility that GST authorities will get into these aspects. They'll look at your manner of distribution, and therefore it's absolutely critical that we look at this and implement the ISD in the most correct manner. Over to you, Krunal.
Thanks, Rutraj. Okay, so again back to the portal. So for ISD distribution, as we have just discussed, it is dependent on the recipient locations turnover, past turnover. So when we are creating the locations into the Cygnet system, when we are creating your business hierarchy, incorporating business hierarchy into it, at the same time, we just need to, on the same screen, we need to mention the turnover. Okay, turnover of your previous years for each and every. This is a one-time activity every year we need to do for all the entities. Okay, and now the distribution is also dependent on the reconciliation with the 6A data. Okay, so again, the purchase register you need to sync, that can again be synced in the similar fashion as we have just discussed for IMS. And that is a separate module here, like ISD written. There are different submodules given here, like the overview, where user can see the data intactness of which is synced from the ERP, and high level overview of the overall data and distribution they have done. Then the documents is nothing but the purchase register which you have just uploaded or synced from the ERP. Then the next and the main ground of reconciliation and doing the distribution is this 6A reconciliation screen. Again, it is very much lookalike to the IMS reconciliation screen, where we are showing certain statistics here, the reconciliation status and the different bucket-wise status and the total records and counting the bifurcation, right? Then beside it, the main reconciliation, again, here, the reconciliation engine is again working in a very similar fashion to the IMS, like the purchase and the 6A data is is being synced from GST portal automatically as soon as it is available, since we have the settings enabled into the entities. As soon as the counterparty data and the purchase register available, system will automatically run the reconciliation out of it. Once the reconciliation is done, the next thing will be the distribution. So here, user, let us say they want to distribute the purchase transactions which are in the match condition right now. So they are selecting them, then click on this distribution button, and based on the turnover which you have set for the recipient locations, all those recipient locations will be available here, and the distribution percentage will be automatically calculated based on the turnover. Now it's up to you whether you want to distribute this and whatever the invoices, purchase invoices you have selected or filtered out, those will be visible here as a summary, that what is the total invoice value, what is the total amount, everything will be visible. Then it is your choice whether you want to distribute the credit among all the recipients or for any selected number of recipients only, and the distribution percentage will change accordingly. As soon as you are doing this, you can click on the prepare distribution. Okay, and it will prepare the distribution documents for these locations. Okay, so this is the main purchase document which you have selected to distribute, and these are the documents which system has generated. Now user can eyeball these invoices, and if he's satisfied, if he's not satisfied, he can delete these transactions as well, and he can redistribute it. And if he's satisfied, he can select all the transactions, he can take bulk actions as well, and then just click on the generate document. Okay, as soon as he is clicking on the generate document button, all the ISD challans will be generated. Okay, ISD invoices will be generated, and it will be visible into the document section with a filter that type distribution. As soon as you are applying this, here all the transactions are the distribution invoices which Cygnet system has generated automatically. Okay, now one need to simply eyeball this and just push it onto the GSTN portal, and then your GSTR 6 will be parallelly prepared, and you just need to go to the GSTR 6 screen, just eyeball this as well, and then you are very much ready for the filing purpose. Now, this is completely within the Cygnet system. Now, if you have the distribution mechanism already in place in your ERP, you can avoid the auto calculation by the system here. We can sync the distribution transactions from your portal itself. From your ERP itself, means the purchase transaction as well as the distribution transaction can also be synced from the ERP itself through the integration or manually as well, right? So this is all about the solution which we are having in place. Now, the similar solution is we have developed within the SAP system as well. Now, SAP is having certain standard functionalities available for the distribution. However, we have further simplified the same because the traditional and the original method, the standard methods available within the SAP is quite cumbersome. So we have simplified the same and made our own Z solution out of it. So I'll not going in the detail, but would like to show you some glimpse of it. So this is the solution which we have in place for SAP, where the distribution and the challan generation, everything which is happening within the SAP cockpit itself. Okay. So here you can see, you can put up the particular criteria to bring the invoices on the screen, which you would like to distribute further. Okay, and then it will be visible like this. Then further, you can select the entities out of which you have already configured, which is in this system based on the turnover, it will be visible to you. Now it is up to you what all entities you would like to distribute transaction further. Okay, so you can select those entities and then just click on the ratio calculation, and it will show you the transactions further. Okay, the distribution transactions further. It will be looking like this. Then further, once you eyeball this and you are satisfied, you can click on the post document and it will post the entries. Okay. Then further, the distribution transaction, there is a distribution report also we are giving, which you can run with certain criteria. Put up the criteria and all the distribution transaction will be visible like this. Okay. And we have also given the functionality of generating, we have given the functionality of print the ISD invoices. So at the time of printing the ISD transactions, the invoice numbers will be generated, and it will be helpful for you to hand over these transactions to your recipient entities. Okay, so generate ISD invoices, and all the ISD invoices will be generated. Further, you can take the printouts through the smartphones. Okay, and then you can hand it over to the recipient entities. So this is an end-to-end program we have designed within the SAP itself. Okay, so that is it from our side.
Thank you, Kunal. Thank you, Ruturaj.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so we'll take up the Q&A sessions now. So audience, you can drop your questions in the Q&A section. We do have few questions. So first is there a functionality where I download the Excel of items to be actioned from the IMS and then populate my action of accept, reject, etc. and upload it back to the portal so that my status is updated in the GSTN record?
Yes, very much possible. So as I've explained, there is a functionality of downloading the Excel sheet where there are two columns we are giving. One is action and one is remarks. So you can download the Excel file from the IMS reconciliation screen, then put up the remarks and the actions out of the system, whatever the exercise you are doing out of the system, and then upload the same file again. And system will automatically reflect all those actions based on the flags you have mentioned. And then further you can push it to GSTN portal. So this is very much possible, yeah.
Okay. The next question is how ISD credit will be distributed in the same month if the invoice will not match with the GSTR 2B?
Okay, so I'll take that up. So in case of ISD, as I was mentioning, so once our vendors who have raised invoices on the ISD registration, the way you have GSTR 2A, you have something called as GSTR 6A. And if a particular invoice does not come into my GSTR 6A, I will not even be able to distribute it. So just the way I can't take any input credit unless it appears in my GSTR 2B, I will not be able to distribute credit if it doesn't come in my GSTR 6A. So I'll have to therefore follow up with the vendors and make sure that they are reporting that invoice. And only once it's visible, it's available in my GSTR 6A is when I can distribute that credit.
And we have one more question. For the corporate office rent, which option will be used? ISD or cross charge?
So see, corporate office rent, now that is a very factual scenario. So we'll have to look at each case. So for example, let's say if my corporate office is providing certain functions, okay, which are central functions, then in such case, what can happen is that I can use the corporate credit and distribute it through my cross charge, because for me to say that that is a service which is common across all the location may not be true for all the companies, for all the fact patterns. So depending on how your business is organized, what are the functions which are being undertaken at my corporate office, what are the functions which are being undertaken at my head office, depending on that, we'll have to decide whether it should be routed through a cross charge or it should be routed through an ISD. Anand, you have to add something to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, for a particular vendor input service, whether it should form a part of a cross charge or ISD, some of the key factors that needs to be there is ISD is typically for a common service that is used by multiple locations. Say, for example, we will have an SAP or an IT service, okay, that is being used across the locations, okay. And cross charge is for internally generated services. Say, for example, one service that is being provided to another GSTN by one GSTN of a company that goes into that one. So we will have to be, I mean, conceptually, we'll have to be clear. ISD is for common vendor services that are used by multiple locations. Now, can we say that a corporate office rent is used by branches, or there are different views, but one view is also that is corporate rent used by the corporate office for functioning as an HO, you know so there has to be some underlying rules that have to be looked into. IMS is typically for common services. You will have IT, you will have statutory auditors that will go into this ISD as a functionality. And what goes into cross charge is cross charge is applicable only if we say that an head office or maybe a branch office is providing services to another GSTN. Okay, and how that is to be valued. If we say that any service is consumed by an head office or a branch office in providing services to another GSTN of the same legal entity, then that particular vendor service should form a part of the valuation of the cross charge. I think that's all I had to say.
Okay, I have a few other questions. We can take a few and then we'll try to answer a few over an email. So we have question, if any software is being used by multiple branches and there is no consistency in the usage, would we need to split the ITC?
Yeah, so see, the way in which the GST law has talked about ISD distribution is not based on actual usage. The distribution happens on the basis of turnover. So what I mean to say is that, let's say there are 3 registrations that I have. 2 registration are using that software regularly, depending on what activities that they do. Vis-a-vis the third registration uses that very selectively on maybe in comparison with the other 2 registration, just maybe just 10% of use is attributable to the third GST registration. Irrespective of this actual utilization, the GST law has provided manner of distribution on the basis of turnover of these three registrations. So if the turnover of these three registration is, let's say, same, then I'll have to allocate this software related ITC equally across all three registration, irrespective of the use of that software among these three registrations. But if I have a situation where I have, like I said, three registrations and only two of my registrations are using that software and the third one is not using it at all, then in that case, I'll have to restrict my distribution or limit my distribution to just the two registrations which are using this software.
Okay, we have another question. Other than SAP like Oracle integration, reverse integration is possible?
Yes, reverse integration is very much possible.
We'll take up the last question now. If the action against which to be record like pending invoice, that case how can we take credit in next month? It will be reflected in current month to be record, or we can take action on the previous IMS record. I'll repeat it. If we take action against to be record like pending invoice, in that case, how can we take credit in the next month? It will be reflected in current month to be record, or we can take action on the previous IMS record.
So, Nishta, once you take an action and for any record, say for example, we accept that in the IMS and then it flows to 2B. For any reason, if it is not matching with my purchase register, it could be for any reason. The very fact that the invoice is uploaded, it is appearing in 2B, I am still be eligible to claim the credit in the next month, provided it is within the time prescribed under the law. Because what happens is, from a tool perspective, if it is reflected in 2B, the reconciliation will always be performed on a YTD basis.
Okay. Perfect. So I think we'll wrap the webinar today. A huge thank you to our speakers, Anil sir, Anand, Ruturaj, and Kunal for the valuable insights, and all of you to joining us. We truly appreciate your time and engagement. We'll share answers to your questions, PPT, and the recording with you very soon. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Stay connected, and we look forward to seeing you in our future webinars. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.